My name's Eliza. Growing up, the difference between me and my twin sister Anna was like night and day. She was the golden girl, and well, I wasn't. Our dad, a stern university professor, had his life's work tied up in books and lectures, while our mom was the quintessential housewife, dedicated to her home and family, pushing us to follow in her footsteps. From as early as I can remember, being at home felt more like sitting through a never-ending critique session. My parents had a blueprint for the perfect family, and it didn't include a daughter who wore band t-shirts and liked to keep to herself. "Eliza, why can't you be more like your sister?" was my mom's favorite line, usually tossed my way when I showed up at breakfast with my headphones in, trying to block out the world. Anna, on the other hand, basked in the glow of approval. "I just don't get why it's so hard for you to put on a nice dress and smile more," she'd say, flipping her perfect hair over her shoulder. It was like she was from a different planet. One particularly grueling Saturday, as our family prepared for one of Dad's faculty parties, a total snooze fest but mandatory appearance for us, I decided to rebel in the smallest way I knew how. I put on my darkest eyeliner and a pair of boots that definitely did not meet the appropriate standard. "You're not going out like that, are you?" Mom caught me on the stairs, her eyes darting down to my boots as if they were covered in mud. I shrugged, my standard defense. "Don't see why not." She sighed, that long, drawn-out kind that said I was the biggest disappointment in her perfectly ordered world. "Please, Eliza, just this once, can't you try to fit in?" "What for? So you can pretend we're the perfect family?" I shot back, tired of the same old song and dance. "It's not about pretending. It's about showing respect for your father," she argued, her voice taking on that sharp tone that meant business. Anna, overhearing the exchange, came trotting down the hallway, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a judge approaching the bench. "Mom's right, Liz. It's not that hard to look decent. Why do you always have to make things difficult?" "Maybe I don't want to be a clone of you, Anna," I snapped, feeling my face get hot. I hated these arguments, hated being compared. But more than anything, I hated feeling like the odd one out in my own home. Dad appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his brow furrowed. "Enough," he commanded, his voice firm. "Eliza, go change. Now. We're leaving in 10 minutes. His tone left no room for argument. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. The disappointment in his eyes was enough to send me marching back to my room to swap my boots for bland flats and wipe away half my eyeliner. As we drove to the party, the car was silent except for the classical music Dad insisted on playing because it was calming. I stared out the window, the trees blurring past. In that moment, I promised myself, someday I'd live a life where no one could tell me what to wear, how to act, or who to be. Someday, I'd be free from the echo of these expectations. My room was the only corner of the house where I could pretend I was somewhere else, anywhere else. Unlike the rest of the house, which was filled with my parents' choices, my room was mine. It wasn't much, just 4 walls covered in sketches and music posters, but it was my escape from the reality of my family's expectations. One evening, as I was trying to lose myself in a playlist of my favorite bands, Dad knocked and marched into my room, his face set in a familiar frown. "Eliza, turn that noise down. And why haven't you studied with Anna today? You know you both have exams coming up," he said, his voice stern. I pulled out one earbud and looked up at him, trying to keep my voice even. "I've been studying, just not with Anna. I learn better on my own." Dad shook his head, clearly not buying it. "You know the rules. Your sister gets good grades, and you should be doing the same. I don't see why you always have to make things difficult." "It's not about making things difficult," I said, my frustration growing. "I just don't see why I have to follow Anna's way of doing everything. Can't I have my own way of studying?" He didn't respond to that, just switched his complaint. "And those friends of yours, I saw you with them at the cafe yesterday. I don't think they're a good influence. You should be spending time with the daughters of my colleagues. They're more suitable." I felt my temper rise. "Suitable for what? For you?" Because they talk about economics and pretend to enjoy those boring university gatherings? Before he could answer, Mom appeared at the doorway, her voice sharp as she joined in. Eliza, your father is right. Those girls are from good families. They know how to behave. They're the kind of friends you should want. I stood up, facing both of them. What if I don't want friends who are picked for me? What if I want to choose my own friends, choose what I study, or even what I want to be? That's enough, Eliza, Mom said, her tone final. You know your future is with the university. Your father has made sure of that. And after you graduate, you'll need to start thinking about settling down. We've already discussed this. Settling down. The words hung in the air like a life sentence. You mean, start thinking about being someone's wife? Like Anna? Is that all you think I'm meant for? Mom's face softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. We want what's best for you. Following the path we've set out will give you a good life. A good life, I repeated, the irony bitter in my mouth. Is it a good life if it's someone else's idea of good? No one answered that. They didn't need to. We all knew there was no point in arguing. They had their plans, and they expected me to fall in line, just like Anna. Anna and I were like two sides of the same coin, always together, but never on the same page. At university, where Dad taught, the differences between us grew even more obvious. She was into business management, the golden child, always nodding along in lectures, asking smart questions that made professors nod appreciatively. Me? I was stuck in the same program, but it felt like wearing a shoe on the wrong foot, awkward, uncomfortable, and just plain wrong. One afternoon, as I trudged through a mountain of textbooks in the library, Anna breezed in, her notes organized, her smile ready. Hey, Liz, you coming to the study group tonight? Professor Hall mentioned he's dropping by, could be good for us to show face, she said, her tone light but insistent. I glanced up, feeling the weight of her expectations. Nah, I don't think so. Those things aren't really my scene, you know? She frowned, placing her books down with a thud that matched her disapproval. It's not about it being your scene, Liz. It's about making the right impressions. You need to start taking this seriously. We're graduating soon. I shrugged, turning back to my notes. I am taking it seriously, just not in a way that makes me miserable. Why bother pretending? Because, Liz, sometimes you have to play the game to get ahead. You think I like all of this? She gestured around at her perfectly tabbed textbooks and color-coded notes. It's not about liking, it's about doing what's necessary. I shook my head, pushing back my chair with a scrape. Well, maybe I'm tired of doing what's necessary according to everyone else. Did you ever think of that? Her voice softened, but her eyes were steel. Liz, I'm just trying to look out for you. Dad's not going to be around to sort things out forever. What are you going to do if you keep alienating everyone? Maybe I'll figure it out on my own. Maybe I don't need to follow Dad's roadmap or yours. I shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. Anna sighed, her frustration clear. You're so stubborn. Just try, okay? For me, if not for yourself. Show up tonight, talk to Professor Hall. It won't kill you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my annoyingly perfect sister, but someone who actually cared, in her own way. Fine, I'll think about it, I conceded, not ready to promise more. Thank you, she said, her smile returning. It's not that bad, you know. You might even like it if you gave it a chance. Doubt it, I muttered, but I knew I'd lost this round. For Anna, I'd show up, sit through another boring discussion, and nod at the right times. It was just a few hours, I told myself. How bad could it be? As it turned out, not as bad as I thought. Professor Hall was surprisingly interesting when he wasn't lecturing from a podium. I even asked a question, which earned a shocked but pleased look from Anna. Later, as we walked back to our dorm, Anna nudged me. See, not so terrible, right? That fragile piece didn't last long, however. In our last year, Anna introduced us to her fiancé, a lawyer 10 years her senior, already well established and exactly what our parents dreamed of. Mom and Dad were over the moon, praising Anna for making such a smart match, and immediately turned their expectant eyes on me. "Now, Eliza, it's your turn to find someone suitable," Dad said one evening over dinner, his tone implying that my time was running out. Mom nodded enthusiastically, already planning out my life as if it were another one of her well-organized home projects. "Think about your future, dear. Someone who can provide for you, who has a good standing." I remember staring at my plate, feeling the walls close in. Anna's wedding was meticulously planned down to the last detail by Mom, from the bridesmaids' dresses to the floral arrangements, showcasing her perfect vision of family prestige. After the wedding, Mom often visited Anna, doling out advice and ensuring her life played out just as she had orchestrated. Witnessing this, I knew one thing for certain: I didn't want my life tailored by someone else's hands. One day, I was walking down the street, lost in thoughts of how to escape the life my parents envisioned for me, when I heard the deep rumble of a motorcycle approaching. Curiosity pulled me toward the sound. That's when I saw him, Jake, with his leather jacket and carefree smile, pulling up beside me. "You look like you need a ride," he called over the roar of the engine, a playful twinkle in his eyes. I hesitated, glancing back towards the path home, then at his outstretched hand. What did I have to lose? "Sure, why not?" I replied, my voice a mix of nerves and excitement. Climbing onto the back of his bike, I felt a rush of adrenaline as we sped away. The wind whipped through my hair, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed, genuinely laughed. Jake shouted something about showing me his world, and I held on tighter, not wanting this moment to end. We stopped at a diner frequented by bikers. Over burgers and fries, Jake told me about his life as a welder, his passion for bikes, and his love for the open road. It was so different from anything I was used to, raw and real. "Don't you get scared, living like this?" I asked, my voice barely above the clatter of plates and chatter around us. "Scared? Nah, it's thrilling. You never know what's around the corner. Isn't that better than having everything planned out for you?" he replied, his eyes lighting up with each word. Over the next few weeks, we met secretly. Each ride on Jake's motorcycle pulled me further from the life I was supposed to live and closer to the life I wanted. The speed, the adventure, it wasn't just about the thrill. It was about feeling alive, feeling free. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a secluded overlook, Jake turned to me. "Eliza, I don't just ride to escape. I ride to feel alive, to make every moment count. With you, every moment feels like it's worth something." I leaned into him, my heart beating fast. "I've never felt like this before. You make me feel free, Jake." He smiled, pulling me closer. "Then let's not go back to just existing. Let's live." 6 months with Jake felt like a lifetime of moments I'd always dreamed of. The day he proposed, under the stars with the gentle rumble of his bike in the background, my heart screamed a yes, before my mouth could form the word. It was perfect, except for one looming hurdle: my parents. I wrestled with the fear of introducing Jake to them. He was everything they disapproved of: his rough edges, his wild spirit, his simple yet content life as a welder. But love bolstered my courage, and I decided it was time they knew. The day I brought Jake home, he was clad in his usual, a leather vest, black t-shirt, ripped jeans, and a bandana. I loved that about him: he was unapologetically himself. We walked up the driveway, and I could already feel the weight of my parents' judgment. As we stepped inside, Mom's face went pale at the sight of Jake, her eyes widening in shock. "What in the world, Eliza?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Dad's reaction was harsher, his words sharp as knives. "Who is this, and why is he dressed like a thug in our house?" I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "Mom, Dad, this is Jake. He's the man I love. We're getting married." Their silence was deafening. Then, Dad turned to Jake, his tone laced with disdain. "Married? What do you do for a living, young man? What are your qualifications?" Jake, bless him, didn't waver. I'm a welder. I took some specialized courses after high school. I work hard, and I make an honest living. The look on my parents' faces was a mix of horror and disbelief. Mom looked like she might faint. A welder? Eliza, you can't be serious. Dad's voice rose, anger flaring. You expect us to give our blessing to this? To throw away your future for a welder? I felt my resolve harden. Yes, because he makes me happy. Isn't that what should matter? But the life you'll lead, Mom started, her voice tremulous. Will be the life I choose, I shot back, my own voice gaining strength. Dad shook his head, his decision clear. We cannot and will not support this. If you choose him, don't expect to be a part of this family. The finality in his tone broke my heart, but not my decision. Jake squeezed my hand, giving me the strength to face them. Then I choose Jake. I choose us. I choose my happiness. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's jaw clenched tight. If you walk out with him, don't bother coming back, Dad said, his voice cold. Walking away from my parents' house with Jake, my heart was a mess of emotions, pain, relief, excitement, and fear all mixed into one. The night air felt different, like each breath I took was a step further into a new life. We rode in silence for a while, the only sound the steady roar of the motorcycle beneath us. When we finally stopped at a small diner on the outskirts of town, Jake turned to me, his face serious. You sure about this, Eliza? I mean, really sure? There's no going back after tonight, he said, his eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. I nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. I've never been more sure of anything. Being with you, this feels right. It feels like what I'm supposed to do. He smiled, that reckless, charming smile that had won me over the first day we met. All right, then. Let's do it. Let's start our life together. Inside the diner, we found a quiet booth in the corner. The waitress brought over 2 coffees without asking, and we sat there, planning our next steps. So, what's first? I asked, stirring cream into my coffee, watching it swirl and blend. We'll need to find a place to stay, at least for a while. Then, maybe look for jobs. I have some buddies who can help us get started, Jake replied, his tone practical, but optimistic. It's going to be tough, isn't it? I said, more a statement than a question. The reality of what we were doing was beginning to sink in. Jake reached across the table, his hand covering mine. It might be, but we'll handle it together. Tough is nothing new for either of us, right? I couldn't help but laugh, a short, sharp burst of genuine amusement. Right. Together. We spent hours in that diner, talking and planning. Every so often, Jake would throw out an idea that sounded so wild, so free, that it made my heart jump. And maybe one day, we'll save enough to take that road trip across the country, just you, me, and the open road. I'd like that, I said, allowing myself to dream bigger than I had ever dared. Riding back into the city, we began our search. The next weeks were a blur of activity. We found a small apartment on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Jake found work at a local garage, and I picked up shifts at a nearby diner. Life was hard, but it was ours. We made do with what we had, and every night when we came home to each other, it felt like we had everything. Months later, we decided it was time to make it official and got married in a small, intimate ceremony. I held on to a sliver of hope that my family would show up, that they would see how happy I was and let go of their prejudices. But the chairs reserved for them remained empty, and no congratulatory messages came. Despite the sting of their absence, the day was perfect because it was ours. Over time, I grew incredibly close to Jake's mom. She welcomed me with open arms, calling me her daughter, filling in the gaps left by my own family. Her warmth and acceptance healed some of the wounds left by my parents' rejection. Things were finally looking up for Jake and me. After he completed additional diving training and became a certified underwater welder, his income shot up to $150,000 a year. That change made a world of difference. We managed to buy a townhouse in a nice area, the kind of place I'd always daydreamed about but never thought I'd actually live in. I started working as a dispatcher in Jake's company. It wasn't just a job, it felt like I was part of something important, supporting the man I loved and building our future together. On weekends, we'd escape the city on his bike, roaring through winding roads and taking in breathtaking views of nature. Those moments, with the wind in my hair and his warmth against my back, were pure bliss. Living nearby, my mother-in-law became a frequent visitor. One such afternoon, while Jake was tinkering in the garage and I was fixing us some coffee, she arrived looking a bit troubled. "There's been some ugly news," she said as she settled down at the kitchen table. "Something about a professor at the university involved in a harassment scandal." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh? Did they say who it was?" I tried to keep my voice steady, dreading the answer. She shook her head. "No, they didn't mention a name on the radio, but you know how these things go. It's probably all over the TV by now." Nodding, I flicked on the television, tuning into the news. Sure enough, there was a report on the scandal, and as I had feared, my father's face appeared on the screen. The anchor detailed accusations against him, and I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. Turning off the TV, I sat down heavily, trying to process the news. Jake came in, wiping his hands on a rag, and saw my face. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "It's my dad. He's been accused of harassing a student." Jake's expression hardened for a moment before he came over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Eliza. That's tough news. How do you want to handle this?" I shook my head, not really sure of anything at the moment. "I don't know. I mean, what can I even do? It's not like we're close anymore." He squeezed my hand, understanding. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We don't have to figure it all out right now." I decided to wait and see how things unfolded before making any moves. Whatever decision I made, I knew I'd have Jake by my side, and that was the reassurance I needed to face whatever came next. Life had been peaceful until that unexpected afternoon at work, when a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. I hadn't seen my parents in a long while, and the sight of them stirred up a mix of emotions I thought I had put to rest. Both of them looked dramatically changed, the scandal had taken its toll. Mom had lost a lot of weight and looked years older, while Dad appeared broken, a shadow of the stern man he once was. My mother spotted me and rushed over, arms open as if nothing had happened, as if years of distance and disapproval could be bridged in an instant. But I couldn't embrace her, not now. Instead, I stepped back and took Jake's hand, looking for strength in his presence. "Eliza, it was so hard to find you," Mom said, her voice cracking with emotion. Dad, ever the gruff one, cut to the chase, his voice harsh and bitter. "I was accused unfairly, you know. I went to your sister's husband for help, but that bloodsucker wanted a fortune. Your sister sided with him, and now they've kicked us out. We need your help." I stared at them, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "Help? After all these years, you show up and demand help? We have nowhere else to go." Mom's voice was desperate. "They've disowned us too. We thought, maybe we could stay with you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Stay with me? After you disowned me? You made it clear I wasn't your daughter anymore." Dad's face turned red, his old temper flaring up. "You owe us, Eliza, after all we've done for you." "That's where you're wrong," I interrupted, feeling Jake squeeze my hand in support. "I don't owe you anything. You threw me out because I chose my happiness over your demands. And now you want what? To just move in and pretend like we're a family?" The situation was spiraling, and I could see people watching, a crowd beginning to form. Mom started to cry, her sobs loud and attracting even more attention. "You're being ungrateful, after everything we've done for you," she accused through her tears. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. "No, Mom. I'm not ungrateful. I'm free. And happy. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." As we walked away, I heard my dad yelling, but Jake leaned over and quietly told the security team, "Don't let them come here again." The following months flew by, filled with love and peace. We welcomed a son, a new beginning in our growing family. My parents never came back. That day in the parking lot was the last I saw of them, and while part of me grieved for what could have been, I knew I had made the right choice for me and for my family.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.